Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order for the Board of Podiatric Medicine meeting on December 2nd. Currently, we have 4 members of the board. 2 of our members will not be present today, so of the 6 board members, we do have 4, which meets the quorum. If we want to do a roll call right now.
Roll call. Good morning. I will take roll call. John Shaw.
Here.
Michael Zapp.
Here.
Christina Dixon. Neil Mansdorf.
Present.
Judy Manzi. Darlene Elliott. So
Okay,
we do have a quorum.
Okay, great. Next, we're going to go on to the President's welcome. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for attending our board meeting. I'd also like to thank our new executive officer, Brian Naisland. And I'd also like to thank all staff members. We're a staff member short with the departure of Kia, and we certainly do appreciate everyone's extra efforts to make up for that. So once again, thank you for that. Generally, I would like to thank everyone for a tumultuous but productive year this year. We've obviously had some issues rise, a little unusual for our normal model board that flies under the radar. However, I think in the future this could be beneficial for all stakeholders. One thing I want to mention is that I will be resigning at the end of December 2017. The reason behind this is I did join a big orthopedic group, and I will be handling all of their foot and ankle issues, and because of that, I just don't have the time to dedicate to serve on the board anymore. And that I do apologize. I feel bad about it, but I have to do what's best for me and my family and the consumers involved. Next, we'll have a comment on the public. Public comment on any agenda items are certainly encouraged. For non-agenda items, the board may not discuss or take action on any matter raised during the public comment section except to decide whether the matter be placed on future meeting agenda. We certainly welcome all members of the public. Is there any members of the public that wish to introduce themselves? Okay, with that being said, we're going to go to item number 4, which is approving the minutes of both the September 9th and the September 23rd meeting. Has everyone been able to review those minutes? And if so, are there any corrections or additions or deletions? Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
Zapp, so moved.
Mansdorf, second.
Any discussion or public comments? Let's vote. Dr. Mansdorf, if you may start.
Mansdorf, aye.
Zapp, aye.
John Shaw, aye.
Judy Manzi, aye.
Okay, so those minutes were accepted and approved. Next, we're going to go to item number 5, which is nomination for officer position and appointments to committees. I'm going to start off with the subcommittees. Now, we're down to 6 members, and it has been time-consuming to do the subcommittee meetings. A lot of it's in the morning, and then you got to take the afternoon off. So what I would propose is to combine some of the subcommittees into one. So perhaps we could combine public health with licensing, or public health with legislation to do a 2-for-1 so that the committees could be done without sacrificing a lot of time on the board members. Now, generally, Kathleen, which of the committees are the 2 shortest, typically? Do we have an idea?
I'm not sure, but I think licensing and enforcement tend to stay in the same type of reporting to the board with statistical quarterly analysis and things like that. Maybe they automatically would merge.
Okay.
But I'd have to say it's not legislation, and it probably isn't. It probably is public education.
Yeah, that's what I would think. Public education be the shortest.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would propose is to combine public education with either licensing or legislation, so that we would have 4 committees, one of them being a combination of 2.
Yeah, so since I was running the public education one, I do think you, rather than enforcement, if you want the newsletter to be more about, more like what the enforcement newsletters are kind of like, then you could marry it with that one. But honestly, I think legislative is better because I think there's more of an overlap between what we're trying to do and, because remember, the public education was, yes, it was to educate the public, and I think I see it more going hand in hand with that than enforcement.
I understand, I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's a good combination.
Even though legislation subcommittee takes the longest generally?
It
Because
has
public
this year.
education doesn't take that long. You just have to kind of target what you want. Now that we have the newsletter, thank you very much. If it basically is like, what are what do we want to see? And pretty much have our categories arranged. So.
Okay, if everyone's agreed to it, what I would recommend is to combine public education and licensing, so that in the future we would have that combination, second one being licensing, third one enforcement, and the last one executive committee. So we would have 4 subcommittees, a total of 8 members, and we're going to have to decide which one of the members are assigned to which subcommittee. I'm not sure if we have to do that now.
Can we do it in a closed session? Or does it, you know what I'm saying?
That's open session. It's often president's prerogative.
Okay.
I would suggest at this point, maybe our new president could take that. Now, does that have to be done in open session, the assignments?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that means that for 2017, we would have a new president and a vice president. So with that being said, I think we should move on to the election of officers, and that would help us decide which board members will go on which executive committee. The problem is that with me resigning at the end of January, we would have 5 board members. So perhaps it's better if we wait till 2017 to assign the 5 board members, because there could be 5, there could be 6, we don't know.
Well, we still need to have a subcommittee meeting before the next board meeting, so you may want to keep existing positions and then
Okay.
change at the next meeting.
Okay, let's move on to the election of officers, and then we'll fill in the subcommittee meetings afterwards, because that way at least we'll have the executive management committee set for the next subcommittee. So the first position that that we're going to discuss is the president, and I think that Dr. Zaff has done an excellent job as a vice president, so I would nominate Dr. Zaff for our next president.
I second that nomination.
Is there any discussion or public comments? Okay, shall we take a vote? Dr. Mansdorf?
Mansdorf, aye.
Dr. Zaff, aye.
John Shaw, aye.
Judy Manzi, aye.
Congratulations, Dr. Zaff.
Thank you.
The next position that we need to fill is vice president. Does anyone have a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Judy Manzi.
I would second that. Do any discussion or public comment? Dr. Mansdorf, do you want to start off the voting?
Mansdorf, aye.
Zaff, aye.
John Shaw, aye.
Judy Manzi, aye.
Excellent. Congratulations, Dr. Manzi. You're going to do very well. Our next position, and our last position that we're going to fill is secretary, which is a new position that our board has decided to enter starting in 2017. And for the secretary position, does anyone have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Darlene Elliott.
I would second that motion, or second that nomination. Any public comments or discussion? Now, I did have correspondence with Ms. Elliott in the event that she would be selected as secretary. Would she be interested and be willing to accept? And I have email confirmation that she would be willing to accept that position as our new secretary for starting next year. So with that information, do we want to vote, Dr. Mansdorf?
Given that information, then Dr. Mansdorf, aye.
Zaff, aye.
John Shaw, aye.
Judy Manzi, aye.
Okay, congratulations to Miss Elliott for our secretary position for 2017.
Dr. Cha,
Yes,
I know Dr. Zapp nominated Miss Elliott, but I didn't hear the second.
that was
Dr. Shaw.
that was me.
Okay, thank you.
So going back to the subcommittee meetings for the executive management, we would have Dr. Zaff and Dr. Manzi filling in the role for executive committee. So we would have public education and public education and legislation. Do most board members want to stay where they are, or do they want to switch? Is there any request? Okay, with that being said, I think we've got 3 subcommittees. We need 6 board members. Dr. Mansdorf, would you like to stay on the enforcement with Ms. Dixon as your vice chair?
That's fine, and if you need me to fill in an additional location wherever I'm placed is good as well.
Okay, so let's go to legislation. We would have Ms. Dixon.
And it would be education/legislative,
Yes, yes.
right?
So,
What is the new one called?
Legislation/public education. Yeah, how's that?
yeah, I think you can just combine them.
Yep.
So with that, we had Ms. Dixon, Dr. Zaff. I would suggest that we keep Ms. Does anyone have any recommendations, first of all? If not, I would suggest keep Ms. Dixon as the chair of the Legislation Public Education Committee. I would suggest adding Ms. Elliott as the vice chair. So we have those 3. The only one that's left is licensing. And with that, who am I missing?
Because I could leave public education/whatever
You want to do that one, the vice chair
of licensing.
of public education
Sure.
legislation?
You've just,
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
We were okay. So the committee is public education legislative.
Right.
We've got Ms. Dixon as a chairman. Miss Dr. Manzi, would you like to be vice chair of that, or would you like to be the chair of licensing?
I don't have any experience with licensing, but I'm happy to do it if you.
It's not really that
Yes, I'll take that one.
big of a deal. So we got Dr. Manzi as licensing. The only one we're short is the vice chair of licensing.
So
Is this a combined committee? Isn't there one committee now?
No, we're combining public education with legislation.
that's one, but you still have 4 committees.
Yes, we would
So
have 4.
You could, I mean, for the sake of, okay, yeah, that's fine.
So
'Cause
let's
it's 4 of
see.
us.
I think Dr. Zaff is on one committee. Dr. Manzi, you would be on 2 committees.
Right.
So you're
Licensing
full.
and
Ms.
executive
Dixon's
management.
full. So for the vice chair, we would have Dr. Mansdorf or Dr. Zaff.
For which one?
For vice chair of licensing. And
Well, I'm on legislative and executive.
no, Ms.
You're not on
Dixon's
legislative.
legislative and Ms. Elliott's.
I'm off legislative?
Yeah, do you want to stay on legislative?
Because I'm on the Governmental Affairs Committee for CPMA, so I have some, outside access to information.
Very good point. We could leave you at vice chair of legislation, of public education legislative, and then we will put Ms. Elliott as the vice chair of licensing then. Okay, is there any disagreements or? And we could always modify this at the president's prerogative when we get a new board member to fill in that board member at any of the position where there's a couple of committees that have two doctors are serving on two different committees, so it's going to be the president's prerogative with the new board member to fill them in at his discretion.
Dr. Chow, may I summarize to make sure I'm clear?
Sure.
Okay, so public education will now be incorporated in the legislation.
Right.
Correct.
Licensing will be chaired by Dr. Manzi and vice chaired by Ms. Elliott. Enforcement will remain the same with Dr. Mansdorf as chair and Ms. Dixon as vice. The Legislative and New/Public Education Committee will be chaired by Ms. Dixon and vice chair by Dr. Zapp. And Executive Management will be chaired by Dr. Zapp and vice chair by Dr. Manzi.
That is 100% correct. Thank you.
And who's the chair of the Public Education and Legislative?
Ms. Dixon.
Okay, with that being said, that completes number 4. We will move on to, that completes number 5, excuse me. Number 6, we're going to have our executive officers report. Mr. Naslin, would you want to take that?
Yeah, thank you, President. We're going to jump right in, and we have public education, and we're going to have Ms. Cooper present.
Good morning again. Thank you, Mr. Naslin. The public education report is rather short. We have had interesting statistics come in through a new way of looking at the website, and it's very interesting that you really have an international fan club coming from all different countries into this website. And most of the visitors, of course, are from California, but you do have a position on the web that is international. We also instituted your direction in September to answer the inquiries using the prior executive officers' responses, and that has worked out very well. We've gotten many thank yous from people who now have direction that they desperately needed. So thank you, board, for that. That helped us a lot. The newsletter has been received well, and I see it's being displayed over at the DCA headquarters, and people are very happy that we have a newsletter. We encourage people to give us articles, though, because we will need them by the end of January, beginning of February, to meet the next deadline. So we're going to have, at this initial stage, 2 publications, fall and spring. And we do encourage the board members to help us with the copy. The CARES update, apparently we only have less than 800 registered users, and so we don't understand that because every one of our renewing DPMs is paying that $12. So they're part of CURES in that sense, but they haven't registered. So we're going to work really hard this year trying to get that registration up. And that concludes my report on public education.
One quick question. How are we doing as far as the public inquiries? Are we caught up? Are we still?
There are a few remaining that are difficult if they haven't been dealt with before. And Brian is receiving, he's aware of those. Mr. Naslin is aware of those, and I know that they will be dealt with very quickly. It's just everything's been happening so quick, so soon with the new officer that there are a few, but less than a handful.
Okay, so we're making pretty good progress.
Yes, and the ones that are coming in currently are being answered immediately.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, does that conclude the public education update?
Yes.
Next, we'll move on to the licensing program. I'll take that one. At this point, I think Andrea's handling most of the licensing aspects of it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the latest licensing statistics, you can see that for fiscal year 13-14, we had 69 permanent licenses. 14-15, we had 70. 15-16, we had 79. And currently from 16 to 17, we have 14 to date. So those numbers have been relatively consistent over the past handful of years. And right now we have 232 newly licensed DPMs in the last 4 years. It also, the next point is that delinquent renewal notices were mailed to all pending renewals 30 days after license expiration. September, we saw that 85 renewals were mailed and 85 licenses were renewed. In August, 98 renewals were mailed and 76 licenses were renewed by the end of the month. And we did break the license renewal data to include those that are retired or military or disabled or inactive categories. As far as the licensing statistics for residents, we currently have 37 first-year residents, 37 second-year residents, and 41 third-year residents. So with the there has been 3 new residents added to our third-year rotation, so our total number of residency license is up to 118. Next, for the Breeze system update, and the online licensing portion of that is not quite live yet. I don't have we don't have information when that will be live, but we have done everything on our part to comply with that. So we're still waiting for DCA to create the online renewal function. Next item, the continuing medical education audit. For the license that has an expiration date from July through September of 2016, 112 candidates has been selected to audit their CME credits. Of the 112 surveyed, we had a total of 80 that has passed, so majority has proven their documentation. There were 20 candidates that were non-compliant, and I believe their license will be on hold until they prove the documentation of the CME credits. The remaining few, there was one inactive candidate and 3 retired. So the audits are still continuing, and the good news, most of them have complied, and the ones that don't will need to comply to get their license. Next, we're going to go to the APMLE exam, the Part 3, which we know is now clinical. There were 40 candidates that took the test. Of the candidates, 36 of the 40, or 90%, had a pass rate, which is encouraging. And next, item number 5, consideration regarding a renewal application meeting regarding the continuing competence code. Basically, this was one candidate that did not qualify for our continuing competency requirement, not our continuing education CME credits, but the continuing competency. And we have a list of what those are, which are attachment attachment D. This one candidate brought up some documentation that showed attachment E, that an extended course recommended by the board may be used as an avenue to gain continuing competence. So by no means is this a big systemic issue. This is one candidate.
Dr. Cha?
Yes.
I was contacted by CPMA earlier this week about another candidate with the same issue. So these are legacy individuals. There's very few of them remaining in our licensee population, but there are a few. So it is more than one.
Okay, so we have 2. And so we need to decide what action the board wants to take. The executive committee, this topic was brought up to the executive committee, and we felt that we can't just stop this avenue currently. We recommended that that avenue still be left in place for now, so that those applicants are not automatically that they don't lose their license, that they are able to renew. However, we feel that in the future, the board needs to bring up this topic to state specifically whether they want to keep this avenue of current competence, whether they want to modify it and give more details, because that avenue, if you look closely, is pretty outdated. It mentions the courses from CCPM, which is the previous California College of Podiatric Medicine, and it doesn't really define, and some of the courses that were offered, I believe Super Seminar was one of them, is not in existence anymore. So if we were to keep that avenue, we would have to go over specifics of how, what courses would be involved. So rather than going through unless someone has a suggestion of whether they feel strongly that they want to keep this avenue open, closed in the future, or modified, I think that's for discussion and a possible future agenda item to go over more details possibly.
I would actually propose that we bring that up in the licensing committee and have them define the requirements for the additional education for them to maintain their license.
Okay,
Even if you want to have it on a case-by-case basis, it should be predetermined what that course would be, not in retrospect saying they took 4 courses of something.
Correct.
It should be pre-authorized.
I think we're in all agreement that currently, though, those 2 candidates, that this avenue of current competence requirement should be left in place until we come up with a formal ruling. Correct?
I would agree with
That's,
that.
that's what the executive committee found, that we can't just shut them out right now. There is documentation that shows that that is one way to satisfy the current, the continuing competence requirement. So with that, we will add that to the agenda on the licensing committee for discussion on whether they want to keep it, delete it, modify it for future candidates. We don't want this to become a systemic issue, and we need to clarify those requirements.
Is that a motion, Dr. Chow, or just a direction?
Do I need to make a motion on that, or?
No, it's,
Yeah.
you're going to be contemplating taking action sometime
Yes.
in the future.
We're just sending it to the agenda of the licensing
We
subcommittee.
need a motion to accept the current status of those 2 candidates.
Yes.
I make a motion that we accept the educational achievements of those 2 candidates as requirements of our continuing competence.
I would second that.
Is that motion necessary when you're maintaining the status quo?
Well, yes, because you're dealing with these 2 particular individuals, and they've submitted information to the board, for acceptance of their continuing education.
Here's the status.
I know with one of the candidates, at least the person that was discussed at the executive management committee meeting, has actually been renewing their license for several years. So it would be difficult to now all of a sudden say that, the education courses that were submitted, are no longer acceptable. So, so for purposes of just continuing these 2 individuals' licenses, a motion would be in order.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Is there any further discussion or public comments? Okay, Dr. Mansdorf, do you want to start it?
Mansdorf, aye.
Zaff, aye.
John Shaw, aye.
Judy Manzi, aye.
That motion has passed, and those 2 candidates, I'm sure, are relieved.
I will submit the name of the other candidate if they hadn't already contacted DCA or BPM. Thanks.
Okay. Next item, we'll go to item number 6, the BPM quarterly timeline. That is the 3-month timeline of the next meetings. Kathleen, did you want to go over the next board meeting now, or do you want to wait till
Executive Management Committee?
management? Okay. So we'll discuss that at the Executive Management Committee. Is there any other questions regarding any of the attachments or the licensing portion of this meeting? Okay, next then we will go to item number C, which is the enforcement program update. Bethany, do you mind giving us a synopsis?
Just going to do a real brief overview of the statistics. For first quarter, under the complaint data, we had an average of 6 days to close or assign new complaints. This is a big improvement over a year ago, which took 21 days, had to do with staffing issues, but we're well within the target now that DCA has set. For investigations, for the first quarter, average days to complete are 117 days, which is within the 125-day target of DCA. Again, we're making improvement in this area. For disciplinary data, 3 new cases were initiated with AAG during the first quarter. That shows a 200% increase over the same period last year. Sounds large, but because of our low amount of cases, it's not really a big deal. The average completion time was 1,005 days, which is above the target. But if we look at the entire year, we're likely to bring that down. A year ago, there was only 1 case that completed very quickly in 205 days. But again, when we have about 5 or 6 cases completing a year, when we look at the end of the year data, this is probably going to add up and we'll be looking closer to target.
Bethany, to be clear, the 200% increase, it was 1 case versus 3 new cases.
Exactly.
So those are not big numbers.
No.
Okay.
So again, it looks like we're having big statistical differences when it's really very small numbers. No citations were issued this quarter. There was a delay in issuing some citations because of a Section 100 regulation change that needed to be passed. And that was recently passed, so we've been able to catch up on just a couple of citations now that were being delayed. 1 new probationer was added in August 2016, so we currently have 13 probationers. To item D. Sorry, I didn't have a lot of chance to prepare this morning. Yesterday I was in surgery, so I was out, and I had a follow-up appointment this morning. So I'm kind of just catching up with reviewing this information. Item D is covering the entire year. Of course, we're only into the first quarter, so it's only showing a difference from the first quarter over last, and the information is basically covered in items A through C already. There are still adjustments being made with the reports due to the breeze issues and continuing to have developments and corrections made. So, but we are given an overall snapshot of the program, and it's about as close to accurate as can be expected at this time. For the Attorney General information that we received directly from them, we did have 2 cases that were aging significantly, and they were both closed during the first quarter, so they're no longer showing on this report. Or actually, 1 was closed in the first quarter, and the second has gone out for vote. I believe it may be being discussed today in closed session. For the performance measures, I have quarter 4 data for review. Quarter 1 is not yet available. And at this time, the board, along with the medical board, is not reporting measures 7 and 8 because there are still breeze-related issues regarding that data, and so until it's resolved, we won't be reporting that data. Going on to the probation and cost recovery, $13,595.66 was collected during the first quarter, and it's less than the average, which is normally averages about $21,000. The reason why is due to the staffing issues and other things going on. The bills went out a little bit later, so we gave them a little bit later deadline. So a lot of these monies were being collected early in the second quarter and should be reflected in the next report. Consultant expert training. All of our consultants are currently up to date with their training. We had expert training as well through the medical board, 3 different dates on March 19th, October 8th, and November 5th, 2016. 8 of our experts did complete that training during this year, and 1 of them said it was very beneficial and they highly recommended it. However, at this time, medical board doesn't have any additional trainings planned for 2017. I know that there was concerns with the board as to expert training, so we are looking into other avenues. At the time that I wrote this report, we had a meeting with Solid in June, and they were to begin development of an online training so that it would be much easier to roll this out and have the experts attend. The Solid manager then took another position, and Solid determined to hold off on the training until they filled that position and then to revisit it. They did just hire a new manager. I do have a meeting set up next week to look at this again, and I have also invited medical board to be included in this meeting. They said they're highly interested in looking into this as well for cost savings reasons and because it's just difficult to put on the training. I think that with inviting them, because of their size, it might add more weight and we might be able to get this rolling more quickly. So I'm hoping that that is the case. Also, my recommendation at this time, until we can get more training or have an online option, is that an updated manual will be sent out to all the experts that we currently have, and asking them to please read it and sign off on a sheet stating that they've read it and understand the latest information. And that would just be temporary until we can, offer additional training.
Can you tell us, Bethany, what's in the expert manual? Is it a procedures manual specifically, or?
It tells them about their roles and responsibilities. It has sample reports. It goes into their correspondence or interaction with investigative staff and with AG staff, terms and technology that they should use, how they should explain technical terms and try to explain it in more layman's terms that can be used in a court of law and be more understandable to the general public. All the forms that they would need to use, contact information, those sort of things. It does not go into scope of practice. It does seem to differ from practitioner to practitioner sometimes, what is an extreme departure versus a simple departure. I know feedback from the medical board expert training that was given, they do ask those questions, and a lot of the different experts and consultants, they have different viewpoints on these things. So I don't know if scope of practice really is something that can be addressed within this training. There was additional recommendation of a type of review to be given of our experts and consultants of their reports. And at the last meeting, we had Emily Brinkman from the AG's office come in and talk a little bit about that. Basically, they would have to be closed reports, information would have to be redacted, and I don't know if I put this later in my report, but I'll just go ahead and cover
It's
it
on
now.
the next page.
Okay. That I have been developing a spreadsheet of information of all the various cases that have been reviewed, the reports that are available, and whether or not the cases are closed or open. So I was planning at the next enforcement committee meeting to have some additional materials available as far as procedures and how we can start setting up this review process.
There's a few things. We didn't have a subcommittee meeting for enforcement this past quarter, and I think on the next agenda, there's a few items that we need to cover. One of them is the enforcement manual, and apparently some of the board members don't have a copy of that, so if we can forward that to them, and if they have any comments, suggestions that they'd like to see in an updated manual, then send those comments to Bethany, and we'll include that in the recommendations in the updated committee report.
You're talking, Dr. Mansworth, you're talking about the updated expert manual?
The expert manual, yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that. And then also the spreadsheet will figure out a mechanism to disseminate information to board members and how they might wish to review a closed case.
Right.
Ms. DeAngelis,
Yes.
does the expert manual go into the issue of professional negligence or negligence by a professional?
I believe it does, yes.
Okay. Because it is different than traditional negligence in torts and compensation. It doesn't require actual harm in order to be deemed to be negligent as a professional.
And I have actually received a copy of Medical Board's expert manual as well, and so I was going to be taking a look at that, comparing it to ours, and making some adjustments as necessary, because they may have some additional information that we just haven't included. Haven't had a chance to get to that yet. It's been pretty hectic this year. But over the next, couple of months, I am going to be working on those items, so have something to present at committee.
2 questions. Have any of your expert training sessions been taped?
Yes, actually, I believe it was the 2011 training, and I do have on CD or DVD the entire training, so that is available, and that was part of the materials presented or provided to Solid to help develop an online tutorial. But yes, we do have a few copies.
So
of
that's
that.
available to experts to review?
We could get additional copies made and send that out to the experts as well. I mean, if we wanted to do that and send it along with.
I mean, it says here it's
An updated
difficult to get
plan.
the experts to go to training because they don't have time. That disturbed me. Is there any requirement that they be trained?
At this time, it's not part of policy, and the reason why, there are some experts that we have trained that have never even been used. The average number of cases that they review a year actually don't have that data, but it's really insignificant. Our consultants are trained yearly, and they receive the bulk of the cases because they do the preliminary review and determine if something is going to go on to further review. So the few cases that go on for further review, there is probably just a handful. And I'm going to say maybe, 10 to 15. Depending, if we were to train our experts every year, the cost of that program, I don't know, with being such a small board with our budgetary concerns, if it would really be worth it, which is why I'm looking into these other options, and especially if we could have something online, they could do it from home. The feedback about trying to get them to attend, and that's difficult, that came from medical board. They actually don't require their experts to attend training as well. They highly encourage it, but with their budget, they have a hard time paying for it and setting it up. So for a board of our size, it is difficult. I mean, especially if you wanted to have regular training of every year, every 2 years. So I do think that, providing the video, providing a manual, having them certify that they've reviewed it and have the latest information is a good start until we can, look into it further. But I think it would be quite costly to try to require them all to attend, and we may lose some of our expert pool if they weren't able to come.
Maybe this could be addressed at the next committee meeting too, about training for expert. It seems funny to have some experts that have never had any training in what we're looking for. That may result in some of the cases we've looked at where we question their judgment, maybe.
There are a few that have never been to training, but the majority of those also have never reviewed a case.
Because it says down below that you're currently trying to get more consultants and more experts, and if there's no training available for them, it seems like, what's the point of bringing more people in if they're not going to be trained?
The main reason, I believe, for the recruitment had to do with our EEO goals and having a more diverse candidate pool of experts and consultants. So it's not that we are lacking really in the numbers that are available to review the cases, but this survey that we got back showed that we were lacking in some areas as far as diversity.
And as the report shows, we're having a hard time trying to fill in and diversify the pool. We know where we're lacking. We can't require those metrics when we're polling for individuals to fill these positions.
Okay.
It's a little complicated.
Last question. On the cases on the expert manual, are they newer cases, or are they cases that was written 5-10 years ago, or are they updated to include some of the newer cases in the past few years?
It has not been updated since the last training that we held in 2011. So I should probably poll investigators and the DAGs to see if they can provide me with some good reports that we can use updated reports in that as well. So they do need to be updated.
Yeah, I think that would be beneficial, something current on a current case?
Definitely on my to-do list.
Okay. Please proceed.
That being said, I think we kind of covered the consultant and expert recruitment and how we're looking to diversify. There is one item, there's a consultant did apply. This may have been related to the new newsletter that was released where we put an article looking for consultants. So there is one candidate for the board to consider and vote on. See if he could be added to our list of consultants.
Motion to approve Lawrence Bend as a consultant to the BPM.
I'd second that. Any further discussions regarding Dr. Abend or public comments? Okay, we have a motion to accept Dr. Abend. Dr. Mansdorf, do you want to start?
Dr. Mansdorf, aye.
Dr. Zapp, aye?
John Shaw, aye.
Judy Menzie, aye.
Congratulations to Dr. Abend for his new appointment. Did you want to finish?
Yeah, item 5, discussion and consideration of existing BPM policies regarding experts and consultants. Again, I think I kind of already covered some of this, that we may want to make some policy updates to our requirements. Currently, there is no requirement for training for our experts, so that might be something we want to look into as well. And as far as the oversight and review, we discussed that the next enforcement committee meeting will probably be pretty full.
Right.
We may want to schedule a little additional time for that one.
Yeah, let's make sure each of these items is on the agenda for February. Thanks.
Yes.
I think this is an important point. Right now, it seems like one of the concerns are that they are board certified by the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgery. And I think our profession has become more diverse. It's not just all surgery anymore. You have wound care, you got podiatrics, you got diabetes, you've got dermatology. So I think trying to possibly create different avenues based upon your training in these subject matters would be beneficial. It's going to be more difficult in the future for one specific ankle surgeon to be able to be very proficient at limb salvage, for instance. So trying to correlate the case with the actual training is, I think, very important.
I think that we know enough about the backgrounds of who we have in our expert witness pool, and I think the fact that there's only 1 or 2 cases that we actually have to pull from the pool, if we took a moment to look at who the pool is, we could maybe be more, better equipped to assign whatever case comes our way to someone who maybe has a bit more expertise in that specific,
Well, unfortunately, at the level that they're going to be reviewing, the board cannot review the case
Right.
details until it's been completed. So
But maybe the board could look at the pool of applicants and put them in,
they categorize.
in a categorized thing, and then whoever is making the decision as to where to send this review. Because I think the big reason this came up, I think, I don't know, kind of the newest person here, but the reason I thought this came up was because we reviewed a couple of these things that come up and we read it and said, but wait a minute, we kind of not disagreed with the reviewer, but felt a little short sometimes reading what the reviewer had to say. I mean, as far as their opinion was, or the way it was written. No? Yes?
Yeah, I believe it was one case in particular.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so that alone, to me, is the big test of, what are these? And actually, why couldn't you send a reviewer a mock case to do for us and let us read how they reviewed it? Do you know what I'm saying? If that would be a test enough. I mean, if you don't have, after this training, manual goes out to them,
Right.
like an exercise.
I'll definitely need the assistance of some DPMs to create
Yeah.
a mock case, but that is a good idea.
Well, that can be brought up in subcommittee. I think
Yes.
one of the issues is if we have so many different subspecialties that
But a person who's just doing surgery all the time, because that's
Mhm.
becoming more and more. But there are people who just do limb salvage. I'd rather them, look at the wound that was kind of mishandled than the surgeon.
Up until this point, we haven't subdivided the experts. It's a little difficult, I think, for staff to know who specializes in what. I think Ms. DeAngelis can explain how she does the,
Possibly send a survey out to all of our current experts to see
Yeah.
what they specialize
practice is
in
like.
and
Yeah.
add that to the spreadsheet that I have.
Would it be possible to designate one expert witness or expert who is not going to review cases, but to look at the case and assign it to the appropriate person?
The possibility.
They don't
or
have to
maybe
be
we
on the
could
board,
use
but they would be,
That's actually a good.
one of our
it would be like
consultants
the chief
maybe
judge
to
or
do that.
The
the chief
consultant.
justice, and say, this is somebody in your expertise.
That's actually not a bad idea.
Another option.
And I think it involves maybe more of these experts, feel like they're more, it certainly creates more work for them, but, it at least gives us more opportunity to reach out to them.
I like Bethany's idea as far as doing a survey to see which subject matter that they tend to specialize more in. Is it ankle surgery? Is it pediatrics? Is it dermatology? Is it wound care, limb salvage? And then they could check off the 1, 2, 3, the topics that they feel more competent in or more experienced in. And that way you have a pool of different experts in certain pathologies that you can send to write a case on those subject matters.
And I think for the most part, we could probably get a better outcome with that. Again, because of the small population of DPMs and the fact that a lot of them know each other, we also have to look in the fact that they have no conflicts. So there may be a chance that the person with the most specialty or, in that area may have a conflict with the individual, and we would still have to go to another DPM expert to review the case, but we could definitely, fine tune it a little bit more.
Okay.
I think that concludes my report unless anyone has any more questions.
Thanks. I'd like to commend Bethany and staff for their hard work on the enforcement committee. They've been doing a great job. Thanks.
I agree. Thanks. Okay, moving on to item number D, we're going to go to the legislative program update. Ms. Cooper, please.
Yes, good morning again. I'm about to give you the legislative program report update, although I'm sure you're all aware that this time of year is not really a busy time for the legislative program. We did have last year 3 successes, and the first one was 2193, AB 2193, which extended the operation of the Board of Podiatric Medicine from January 1st, 2017 to January 1st, 2021. So that, of course, was all your hard work with the sunset review, and it was a success. SB 1478 was also the bill that was initiated here by the board, which added the secretarial position to Section 2467. And now we do have this extra officer position, which will help you in transitioning and filling in the blanks if somebody's not available. The SB 1039, we all know all too well that it took a lot of our time last year, but it was a success in that your goal was to be removed from that, and in fact you were. So for the time being, BPM is still remaining within the jurisdiction of the Medical Board of California, but we do know that we will be revisiting that quickly, very quickly, in the Medical Board Sunset Review, which should be happening a little earlier this year. We understand it might be actually heard in February. Normally it would be heard mid-March, but we're prepared either way to respond to that. If there's no questions about the legislation, I'll go on to the regulations. Okay, so we did have the cite and fine, which you will not see on your matrix because it is completed. Well, it's showing there still, but it was effective on the 1st of September. So we do have another one like that with the acupuncture, which is just a small little, actually typo. When they made changes in the past, they didn't remove the D and make it an E, et cetera. So those are the easy ones. We are almost done with the oral argument. Legal has gone over with us, and we'll begin that process of the review through the process of DCA and then present it to OAL. And the long-term one that we discussed last meeting and has not moved forward, but will quickly, beginning of the year, is the disciplinary guidelines, which many other boards have had a little difficulty getting those passed by OAL, the Office of Administrative Law, but we anticipate because they went through it, we might not have to. We'll be using their work to make our submission sometime in mid to late spring. I believe that's it for regulations right now. I do anticipate we will have a busy year in 17, but right now, that's the report.
Okay, do you want to handle item E, or budget update?
Okay, the budget update. I did hear feedback, and I hope the format of this report it better satisfies the board rather than the longer detailed. It's the same information, but it's just much more succinct. So the first quarter of fiscal year 16-17 is on target for what we've seen in the previous years. The total expenditures for the first quarter is $314,696,000. And to compare that with last year, the expenditures were $256, $274. If that feels like a bit of a discrepancy, once again, it is mostly how CalSTARS works and with the reporting of when the bills get in and what accounting is doing, but we do not see any major variation from the prior year. So we still have about 80% of budget remaining for the rest of the year, which is just about right. And the total revenue for 16-17 for the first quarter was $283,445,000, and last year it was $301,864. But you'll see that that also is the same reason. It's either just not entered by the time they cut off the first quarter, or hopefully it'll be showing on the second quarter. It'll catch up to last year. So as far as the fund condition, pursuant to the Budget Act, the Board of Podiatric Medicine shows that the projections based on these current expected expenditures and revenue, that we will have slightly over 3 months operating costs in our reserve fund at the end of this year. And this is a very conservative estimate because, as it has shown for about the last 4 years, this board has not come close to full expenditure. But we're always ready in case there's some enforcement issue we must aggressively attack. So, and we expend those funds. But 3 months is very conservative. It probably will actually end up being closer to 7 or 8. That concludes my my budget report. Thank you.
Any questions?
I
Okay.
have one, actually,
Sure.
on the, under departmental services, the shared services agreement, we're anticipating projections of $50,000 with NBC.
I believe it's 44. Did I say 50 somewhere?
Well, at least projections is showing 50.
On the budgeted amount?
2016-17.
So we're on this page, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and
So it says projections to year end, it's in bold, $50,000.
I cannot tell you why it says 50, but I do know that what we've been speaking to the medical board about is still 44.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, next we'll move on to item number F, the executive management update. If you don't mind, Brian, I'll take over this one. Basically, at our executive committee meeting, we discussed the current status of the medical board's desire to, A, split us off from their jurisdiction, and B, to have our board take over licensing of future DPMs. Those were the two main issues. At our executive committee meeting, we did have some representatives from the medical board to kind of clarify those 2 points. I believe that they sent Brian, did they sent you over the actual language that they submitted?
Yes.
And was that consistent with those two items? Were those the two major points?
Yes, it was.
The jurisdiction issue and having us license. And this is all familiar to us with the SB 1039. The only difference is that they did not include the removal of Chapter 5 from podiatry from Chapter 5, which was probably the most controversial issue presented in SB 1039. And so they are seeking the two issues that I just mentioned. And we've reviewed the laws that was written years ago when our board was housed within the medical board. So we're all familiar with the division, the board, that to their point, it is outdated. Currently, we are doing most of the licensing. To their point, we don't really have, they don't really have much jurisdiction over us. So those are the two main issues that concern them that they're going to be presenting. And their goal was to get the laws to reflect what's happening now. And we've heard this time and time and again, and it makes sense. We certainly don't need outdated laws that are inaccurate. We don't want to confuse the public. However, I've mentioned in the past that we have the same goals. You know, we would like our laws, the current laws, to reflect what's happening now regarding doctors of podiatric medicine, specifically that we have earned the right that with our increased education, those laws that reflect doctors of podiatric medicine being able to call themselves podiatrists or doctors of podiatry or foot specialists were written over 20 years ago. And since then, our residencies have increased from 1 year to 3 years. Our training is almost exactly the same as those of the MD and the DO world. This is something that I've brought over. We've discussed many times with the medical board, with DCA representatives. And this is something that would clear up make our laws more current. If we are going to be our own medical board and have complete oversight over doctors of podiatric medicine who are providing medical and surgical services to the consumers, then they need to be labeled and titled correctly. We were told that to bring this up, not at SB 1039, but at a future legislation. And that legislation will be introduced by the California Podiatric Medical Association in the next few months to make the laws more modern and let the laws reflect what's occurring now. So hopefully with that will make this, our splitting off from the medical board a little more consistent. We constantly get inquiries as far as the role of doctors of podiatric medicine, whether we do surgery, whether we have hospital privileges. So that will clarify the laws so that there's no further confusion among the public so that they're better protected. So those are my thoughts as far as some of the two things that was discussed at our executive committee meeting. Is there anyone that has any questions or comments? Okay, so with that being said, if there's no further comments, I'd like to make a motion that our board supports the medical board's submitted proposal to have our board take over all the licensing of future doctors, or future DPMs, excuse me, and to remove our board from their jurisdiction with the following two stipulations. Number one, that podiatry be left alone in Chapter 5 as is. And number two, that our board and the medical board will continue to work together to modernize the laws to accurately reflect the role of today's doctors of podiatric medicine.
Michael Saff, I'll second that motion.
Okay, do we have any further discussion? This motion would accomplish what the medical board has presented to Mr. Naslin regarding having our board take over the licensing, and it would also remove us from under their jurisdiction. But yes, one of the two stipulations being that we stay in Chapter 5 medicine, because that's what we do. We are held to the same standards as the MD and the DOs that practice wound care, surgeries. The last thing we want is dual standards, for us to have one standard and for them to have another standard. We want consistency, and consistency means transparency and accuracy, and to have contemporary laws reflect what's happening now, not something that was created 20, 30, 40 years ago. So,
And right now, the osteopathic medicine licenses in California are given by the osteopathic board, or who handles their licensing?
they do their own licensing.
Okay, and the dentists? They do.
The dentists do their own licensing. So this motion is to address the medical board's request for us to take over the licensing and the jurisdiction issue. However, I feel like we need to have the proper tools to function so that we're not left out of legislation. More importantly, that the public understands the role of doctors of podiatric medicine and what we do, which is medicine, surgery. We're held to the same standards as that of the MDs and DOs that share the same field as us. It is not a scope issue. It does not change our scope at all. I don't know the official language of CPMA's legislation, but I believe it's going to incorporate some of the things that I mentioned as far as physicians and surgeons of podiatric medicine. So this motion would support the medical board's request with the two stipulations that I mentioned.
Does CPMA support this motion?
I believe so, but I can't speak for them.
Okay.
Do you want to add to that, Dr. Warford?
I think that what Dr. Holtman met with Mr. Naslin and reviewed the MDC language. I'm not sure if I've actually read it myself, but it has been, I think, possibly, I know, reviewed by the executive level of our board, and I am not aware of either, complete agreement or disagreement. And, we have not had a board meeting since the meetings between our executive director and yours. I'm not aware of any other points of contention. I think in general terms there's agreement, but I can't be any more specific than that.
And that's a good point. We don't want this to be contentious. We want there to be harmony. We want to do what's best for the public. Clearly, the medical board representative at our executive committee meeting stated these two goals. They did send Brian the official language, and according to Brian, there was nothing added or deleted to what they are requesting. So they've been pretty straightforward, and that we appreciate. And this is all to better inform the public and get California back to the progressive state that it is regarding our field and our relationship with the medical board.
So this is a little different than the discussion we had last time about this, because last time I thought that the problem was not only did they want us to deliver our own licensing, but they wanted to take us out of the, allopathic medicine.
Correct. That's why my motion, I made that stipulation, number one, that we remain in Chapter 5 medicine. That's what we do. That's what we are. That is accurate. Clearly, CMA has opined that we are placed in the appropriate Chapter 5 medicine.
So I'm not trying to be contentious, but you're reassured that this isn't just one easier step for them to extract us? But the medical board.
I think under the guidelines of complete transparency, I don't think we need to go in like a hard bottle of good Irish whiskey on this. I think there's an elegant compromise that we can make happen here, and as long as we show transparency in good faith, I believe all parties in interest will do the same.
I agree with Mr. Naismith. That is the whole point of this, is that we've had many discussions with all stakeholders, and I think this is one thing that could be a good win-win for all parties involved, namely the consumers and the public. So certainly we want this to be harmonious, and this is one avenue to do that.
If I can make a request, though, if our executive officer is getting information, especially legislation that's been proposed, not all board members are actually seeing this, these materials, and they should be forwarded.
That I haven't had any privy to or seen any type of proposed legislation from the association yet. I was told that they were working on the material.
Not the association, NBC, I think, has a
NBC?
proposal.
I haven't seen anything from NBC, right?
Just the language that I sent.
Just the language of last year? Right. That was probably included with information you guys, when you had 1039.
Yeah, I mean, it's, last year, the legislation said something to the, just basically remove jurisdiction and change some of it so that our board does the licensing. Those are the main things, and
Right.
that's what the medical board told us. And yes, I'm sorry.
This is Ms. Cooper. I would just like to say, Ms. Huckle is here from the Senate, and in a meeting that we recently had, although we don't have the wording of the legislation, it should be a third medical board. So there will be 3 medical boards, which is great news. I mean, it's an agreement that you will have the medical board, the osteo board, and the podiatric board of medicine.
I'm sorry, the medical board and the what?
The osteopathic,
Oh, okay.
the podiatric.
I see.
Ms. Huckle, would you like to come up and add some insight, please?
Hi, Sarah Huckle with Senate Business and Professions, and thank you so much for taking this motion. I'm very glad that we're all coming to a place. I can't make any comments on any exact legislation since we don't know the author or the exact parameters of where it will go. But there was discussion around different options. But I think the core of what we're getting to can definitely recognize the principles.
I'm sorry? Recognizing what?
What you're looking to get, I don't see any reason why we can't definitely abide by those to the extent that we can. As far as other details, those will remain to be seen.
Okay.
I mean, the Board of Podiatric Medicine already exists, and the Osteopathic Board exists, and the Medical Board exists. So those 3 will not change.
Okay. Any other questions? Or Thank you, Ms. Huckle. So I think we've discussed this time and time again, and I think that my motion would benefit all stakeholders, and it would provide transparency and give us more accuracy as far as what is occurring now, and that is the whole goal. We don't want to rely on laws and confuse the public about laws that were written 20, 30 years ago.
Call for the question.
Sure. Okay.
Dr. Nesdorf, aye.
Dr. Zaff, aye?
Dr. Chop, aye.
Yes, Dr. Manzi abstains.
Do we need 4 to pass?
No, an abstention goes with the majority.
Okay. So based upon, we have 3 ayes, 1 abstention, so that motion passes. Okay. So with that, the next item for the executive committee meeting is to discuss our next board meeting. One of the requests that we had for our next board meeting is to house it at one of our podiatric medical schools, probably the one in Southern California at the osteopathic school at Western. I think, Kathleen, you had some correspondence or dates. Can you give us some insight?
Well, we're not sure if it is affected in any way by the medical board sunset date. Our normal meeting would be the first Friday in March, but we were hoping to move it up a little bit. But now that we may have a change in when the medical board sunset review is occurring, you might want to keep it in the March, because it'll give you a week or 2 to respond and gather your thoughts if they have it mid-February. If you were to move it in the same time, you really wouldn't have much more information than you have right now, other than to see what CPMA is going to present.
That's a good point.
So you recommend keeping it traditionally in our first week
It-
of
it-
March here?
Logistically, if the school could accommodate us, right now they're looking at dates earlier in the year, but I think they would be able to work with us. So if that is possible, yes, keep it the same.
The same date at the Southern California?
Yeah, first Friday in March. And
March 3rd.
do we know if the sunset review for the medical board is occurring in February or?
We've had internal discussions and we would like it to be set, but we haven't figured out the exact dates yet. But that's what we're shooting for everybody, so.
So if it happened that we needed to change our date, perhaps we can work with the president and the executive officer if we had to change it, but right now maybe we should just keep it.
Okay, keep it, but at the Western School
Yes.
of Osteopathy.
Yes.
Am I saying that right?
I don't know if it's osteopath, but our part of it, the
Osteopathy?
osteop. Okay.
So our next board meeting is going to be in Southern California at the Western Osteopathy School.
That's March 3rd.
8th?
That is March 3rd, correct, Friday.
March 3rd.
So
Okay.
unless there's a compelling reason to move that date, which the president, I would like to at least be able to work with the school. I'm not sure of that date yet. And, I mean, it would be close to that date.
So you're suggesting it'd be before the date if we're gonna change it?
Mm-hmm.
I think we've had discussion with the school. They would like to have the meeting.
Mhm.
It's just, that date, is it available?
I'm not sure of the March, we haven't firmed that up.
So if it's not available, do we want to have a contingency plan to have it somewhere in Southern California? Or do
Or a
you,
different date?
Yes, if you could leave that to the new president and the executive officer, I'm sure we can,
Okay.
work within those parameters of a week or two from that date.
okay, I would suggest we'll leave that date open and the location to be determined. Okay? Is there any other, unless there's any other questions or comments, that concludes my report for the executive management. Brian, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I would like to recommend
Sure.
during that, the committee meeting. I think there was a discussion at one point during that meeting that there should be a board discussion about giving the executive officer and the president to work together to reach out to various licensees, stakeholders, and whatnot in the parameters under the medical boards and podiatry. So just having a discussion about that, maybe a motion to grant that authority.
I believe that motion has already been made and passed to give the executive management committee, the executive officer and the president, the authority to communicate with stakeholders regarding specifically the medical board's proposal.
Okay, could have been before me then.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
made.
That's my
before.
recollection as
Yes.
well, yeah.
Okay. I just
So
wanted to
you
find
already
that.
have that.
Okay.
Correct. We trust you. Okay. Was there another item, Mr. Nason?
I think that was about it. Yeah.
Yes.
that was it.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments for the board before we move into closed session? Okay, we are going to move into closed session to discuss a disciplinary action hearing, and then we will follow that up with our open session. Okay, and we are going to take a 5-minute break.